Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased that we can together welcome the Professor Andrzej Szeptycki. Andrzej is working, you are working at the University of Warsaw, Faculty of Political Sciences and International Studies. We know you very well in these Geopolitical Tuesdays, personally as well, and in the faculty you are well known. You are well known because you have a different directions of love, I would say. One small one is, I would say, is France, but you have another love that is growing, I believe. Tell me if I'm wrong. And this is a question of Ukraine and Polish-Ukrainian relations. And you just have published a very, very interesting book on contemporary Polish-Ukrainian relations in the very good Polish editing house Scholar. So it was, I don't know, 2 months ago, something like that.
Exactly.
And we are all very curious because Poland has a history of very painful conflicts with Ukraine. And there was a kind of feeling that the subject a little bit disappeared. There were commissions of historians between Ukraine and Poland to speak or not to speak about the past. There is this terrible war now in Ukraine and very strong solidarity of Poland, solidarity, as you are saying, that is related with the direction, general direction of Polish foreign policy. I hope that you will speak more about that. That is on a longer term defining the direction. And we have some other events. We don't know if they are micro events or bigger events, but they are in news, like, I don't know, problem of what are the statistics of the number of truck drivers that are Ukrainian, and you have blockades on the borders or conflicts on the price of the grain, even through there is a war. So I'm mixing all those things that just to let you put some order in this very large topic. Thank you again for being there, and the floor is yours. I hope that at the end we will have a little bit of time for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everybody. Indeed, this is an interesting topic. This is an important topic, and I will try to cover it, maybe not extensively, because we would need more time, but at least to share with you some, some key ideas related to Polish-Ukrainian relations. First, I will speak about the determinants of, maybe not even of the relations, but of this topic, why it's interesting and important. Second, I will speak about why both countries are interested in their bilateral cooperation. So what are their aims? Third, I will speak about 3 or 4 main areas of cooperation. And I will conclude with some remarks on the future in the context of the new government, but not only. So let us start. Why this topic seems interesting and important? Why it makes sense to write or to read a book about that? Poland and Ukraine are the 2 biggest countries in Central and Eastern Europe, if we define Central and Eastern Europe as an area between Germany and Russia. Okay, so they are the 2 biggest, most populated countries here in the region. Well, Ukraine is, keep that in mind, almost twice as big as Poland, okay? Poland makes 312,000 square kilometers. Ukraine makes, in its internationally recognized borders, more than 600,000 square kilometers. However, now their population seems to be roughly the same. In Poland, 37, 38 million, and also in Ukraine, according to Ukrainian demographers, currently we have in its internationally recognized borders some 37 million people, because few million people fled the country after the beginning of the full-scale war. So, well, first, two big countries, okay? Relations between big countries are always interesting, not to offend anybody from any smaller country, but big countries have broader aims, and they simply play a more important role on international arena. For many years, many scholars studied, French-German relations, okay? Or maybe also to an extent Polish-German relations. So Polish-Ukrainian relations is a little bit, for many reasons, a little bit the same type of relations between two major European countries. Second, as you said, Nicola, Poland and Ukraine share a common and quite difficult, in many cases, past. 20 years ago, Timothy Snyder, writing his first major book, or at least his first world-known book on the reconstruction of nations, said that at the beginning of the 90s, when the Balkan Wars started, Poles and Ukrainians were able to overcome the historical differences and were able to start to work on a better future, roughly. And this is very true. Polish-Ukrainian relations are an interesting case of historical memory clashes, historical policies, also of reconciliation and these limits. This is even more interesting because our relations historically had a very asymmetric character, in that sense that for many years they had a non-state character. So there was a kind of Poland or Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth previously, but Ukrainian lands, Ukrainian people were part of this Polish state, okay? In fact, only for a short period of time, like Piłsudski Petlura, more than 100 years ago, in 1920, well, we can speak about interstate Polish-Ukrainian relations. So once again, this changed completely since 1991, and that's also another reason why these relations are interesting. Okay, how these largely not interstate relations were successfully forged into much more symmetric interstate relations. Okay, how we were able, at least partially, we Poles and we Ukrainians, we were able to overcome this heritage, well, slightly post-colonial heritage, in fact, which Russians were not able, by the way, to do. Another reason why our relations are interesting is that Poland and Ukraine, being relatively similar in sense of geographical position, in sense of language, in sense of, their position, their weight in Europe. So despite these similarities, these two countries have been developing for last 30 years in a very different way. Please, I want to be understood very precisely on that point. I will not tell you in a while that Poland was a good pupil in European class and Ukraine was a kind of bad pupil in European class, okay? I don't want you to interpret this in that sense. 30 years ago, Poland and Ukraine were more or less economically quite on a similar level of development. We have introduced in both countries new currencies, the hryvnia and the new Polish zloty. It was 1995, 1996. So the exchange rate of new zloty to dollar was roughly something like 2 and something zlotys for $1, or even 1 and something. And the exchange rate of hryvnia was, I think, 2 and something, 30 years ago. 2 and something hryvnias for $1. Now, as you probably know, we pay some 4 zlotys for $1, while the exchange rate of hryvnias during last 2-3 years reached 30-40 hryvnias for $1. So this already shows you how these two countries developed in a very different way, okay? Poland introduced successful political and economic reforms, the so-called Balcerowicz plan. We have joined NATO, we have joined EU. Well, Ukraine basically did not conduct any comprehensive reforms 30 years ago. It did not join NATO, it did not join the EU, and finally it had to face the Russian aggression, hybrid war in 2014 and full-scale aggression in 2022. Of course, this difference, once again, doesn't mean that Poland was a kind of best pupil and Ukraine wasn't. The starting point in 1989, 1991 for both countries was quite different. Poland was de jure an independent state, even if it was for more than 40 years under Soviet domination. It was also a nation state. Ukraine, since 1991, had to focus on state building, but also on the nation building. Poland had the support since 90s of main Western European countries, and also the US on its road to NATO and to EU. Ukraine basically didn't have such a coherent support. And finally, there was Russia. Russia protested against our accession to NATO, but basically it didn't do much more. Well, in the case of Ukraine, it launched a war. Okay, so for these reasons, as I'm saying, our relations are worth studying. Okay. Second point, as I've said, what do we want from each other? especially what Poland wants from Ukraine. I mean, what are the strategic aims here? Well, for Poland, since early 90s, Ukraine has been the major partner in the East. Of course, there was Russia, which is bigger, which is a superpower and so on. However, for last 30 years, Polish-Russian relations were rather conflictual. And despite some attempts to reset them, this basically didn't work. Well, there's also Belarus, and in case of Belarus, our relations might have been good because we don't have any major historical problems. However, under the rule of Belarus dictator Alexander Lukashenko, any normal Polish-Belarusian relations are impossible, simply. So in that case, Ukraine was of particular value. The key aim of Polish foreign policy towards Ukraine for last, well, at least 20 years was to make Ukraine European. By European, I mean at least two things. First, to make Ukraine European on a civilizational level, to make it accept, to make it respect European standards on different levels. And second, to help it to join the European, the Euro-Atlantic institutions, NATO and EU. So briefly, for years, our leaders would travel from Brussels and Washington to Kiev and vice versa, and they would try first to persuade the Ukrainian leaders to respect European standards, and then they would travel to the West to try to persuade the West to bring Ukraine closer to the West. The last reason why Ukraine was so important is the fact that Poland didn't want Ukraine to be or to come back to the zone of influence of Russia. Polish leaders, also some Polish experts, often refer in that context to a famous quote from Zbigniew Brzeziński, the Polish-born American political scientist and advisor to President Jimmy Carter. Brzeziński wrote some 25 years ago that without controlling Ukraine, Russia will not be, it's not anymore an empire. But thanks to the control over Ukraine, it could be an empire once again. So we in Poland, we don't want Russia to be an empire. And we don't want to, we already have a border with Kaliningrad region. We have a common border with Belarus, but we don't want to have a common border with Russian Empire, a border going, well, almost from the Baltic Sea to Przemyśl and to and to Szeptycki in the Bieszczady Mountains. Okay, so that's why once again Ukraine is so important here. For Ukraine, it was historically, during last 30 years, it was slightly less attached to Poland, okay? I mean, it rather perceived its international environment through the prism of great geopolitical blocks. So it rather considered on one side there is Russia, on the other side there is EU and NATO, and we are in between. So of course there is a Poland, but well, Poland played a lesser role for Kiev than Ukraine for Warsaw. What were the assets of Poland? Looking from Kiev. Well, first, Poland wanted and has been playing for years the role of the advocate of Ukraine. So if Ukraine had any problems, it wanted the West to see and to help to solve, or it wanted the West to accept them. Poland was to play an important role here because of this role of advocate. Okay, advocate, supporter, lobbyist of the Ukrainian interests in the West. Of course, the details here changed a lot, right? Before November 2013, under Yanukovych, or even earlier under Kuchma, Ukraine needed Poland to explain to the Europeans that Ukraine is not so bad, even if they have some problems with democracy. Since 2014, and especially since 2022, Ukraine needs this advocate in the context of the military aggression of Russia. So it's not about diplomacy and about promoting the image of Ukraine, but it's rather about promoting sanctions, supplying weapons, and so on. Second, Ukraine needs Poland as an example of successful transformation. Basically, one of the key associations of Ukrainians considering Poland is that, well, life is better here. Okay. Even Zelensky, in his electoral program in 2019, wrote something. Well, he was an actor, a comedian. Okay, so this was not very serious, but this was kind of very significant in the context of what I'm speaking about. So Zelensky has written in his program, "I'm dreaming about Ukraine where there are no announcements, job in Poland. But in Poland, there are announcements, jobs in Ukraine." Okay, so this is once again what he kind of proposed to his fellows, knowing very well that, well, jobs in Poland were attractive for Ukrainian citizens. And last but not least, at the moment, Poland became for Ukraine, became, well, Europe, and at the same time anti-Russia, okay? I mean, Ukraine for a long time was not only internally weak, but it had also quite an unstable foreign policy, because Ukrainian elites and also Ukrainian people were not very eager and not very able to make a choice between Russia and the EU. This choice was made after Russian aggression, and then kind of suddenly Ukraine rediscovered Poland and its proposals about a European Ukraine, okay? And the role this Polish support was playing. So this is basically about the aims of the two countries. And now let us look more at some concrete aspects, okay, of bilateral relations. There are 4 or 5 aspects which I think need to be mentioned. Okay. First, well, let's start with the most difficult. History. We had a very difficult history, certainly, like several other, by the way, countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And one of the most difficult questions here, at least from the point of view of Warsaw, being the massacres in the Volhynia region, northwestern Ukraine, currently, massacres in 1943-44 committed on the Polish population by the Ukrainian insurgent army. According to Polish scholars, up to 100,000 Poles died then, and 10 to 20,000 Ukrainians. Poland and Ukraine basically don't agree on the Volhynia question. Poland claims that first, this was a genocide. Second, it believes that even if there had been some mistakes in Polish policy towards the Ukrainian minority before the Second World War, these mistakes cannot be equaled to this genocide, cannot be compared, cannot kind of explain this genocide. And finally, third, Poland argues that Ukraine should not consider as national heroes people who were responsible of the genocide of the Poles, okay? So the already mentioned UPA. The Ukrainian approach has been slightly different. First, Ukrainians say that Poles have been persecuting, discriminating Ukrainians, Ukrainian peasants in southeastern Poland, for example, for many years. So basically, it's not like Ukrainians are responsible for all the evil, but rather Poles. Second, they say, during the Second World War, there was in fact a Polish-Ukrainian war going on, a sort of civil war under German occupation, going on in the Polish-Ukrainian borderlands. And last but not least, they say, it's up to Ukrainians to define who are their national heroes, and other countries don't have to interfere, do not have to interfere with that, okay? In that context, since late 90s, early 2000, Polish and Ukrainian authorities made attempts to towards a reconciliation between the two nations. So there have been common commemorations of Polish and Ukrainian victims. Such commemorations took place both in Ukraine and in Poland. This process was not very effective. I mean, first, Ukrainians refused for a long time to openly say that they are sorry for what happened in Volhynia, what Poland wanted them to do. Okay, so this was one problematic issue. Second, these historical challenges did came back regularly from time to time as a problem in bilateral relations. Okay, so everything seemed perfect, and then more than once, because of some other disagreements, because of internal political situation and so on, this history problems would come back to the political agenda. This is what happened in 2008, 2009. This is what happened in 2015 under Poroshenko and Duda, and this is what happened a little bit even this year. However, in a long time perspective, and I will come back to that, we see important changes. These historical issues, especially since 2022, they are losing of importance. So I would say we will not agree on history. We will not have a kind of permanent overall agreement. And we will, from time to time, probably have quarrels on history, but the role loses of importance. Now, when you ask Polish people, when you make an opinion poll on that, they are aware of the Volhynia tragedy, but at the same time, they don't consider it as a kind of major factor anymore. Also, this is important and very unexpected. Ukrainians, since the beginning of the war with Russia, they are using this greeting, Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, so glory to the Ukraine, glory to the heroes. This greeting was used in the 40s by UPA. And for this reason, a few years ago in Poland, it was quite negatively received, okay, because UPA is negatively received. Well, when the full-scale war started, all the friends of Ukraine in Poland basically started to use this Slava Ukraini also as a greeting, as a symbol of support for Ukraine. So basically, once again, the history, problems probably will remain there, especially the question of the Polish victims buried in Ukraine. Poland wants to find their bodies, to to give them a proper funeral, and there have been always some problems with that. However, these historical, once again, disagreements are not of major importance anymore. Second point, which probably needs to be mentioned, second area of bilateral relations. These are people-to-people contacts. When the communism ended, the economic situation, both in Poland and in Ukraine, was quite difficult. So both Poles and Ukrainians were looking on how to earn money by any means, and that's how the trans-border trade would develop. So somebody from Ukraine would buy some, well, cheap cigarettes in Lviv. He would travel to Poland. He would sell the cigarettes. He would buy some stuff which was of better quality in Poland, and so on. Then, with the economic changes in Poland, more and more Ukrainians started to come to Poland to work here or to study here, for example. Before 24th February, we had, well, some people would say 1 million, some people would say 1.5 million of Ukrainians, of citizens of Ukraine, I mean, who were living in Poland as mainly economic immigrants. So these migrations created an important platform of contacts between Poles and Ukrainians. Okay, they were able to get to know each other. Ukrainians were coming to Poland, so they were making friends at work. They were also seeing Poland, which seemed to them, as I've said, much more prosperous, much more European. On the other hand, Poles, I mean political elites, media, ordinary people, were following very closely for the last 20 years all the major political events in Ukraine. I mean, the Orange Revolution, 2004, the Euromaidan, called also the Revolution of Dignity, 2013-2014, or finally the full-scale war with Russia. And this has also brought the two nations closer together. And we can see it very well when we look at the opinion polls. Every year in Poland, our CEBOS, CBOS, so our Center on Research on Public Opinion, asks Polish population, what is your attitude towards different ethnic groups? So 30 years ago, in 1994, 9% of the Poles said that they had positive feelings about Ukraine. 9%, okay? Ukrainians were basically on the same level like the Arabs or the Roma people. 2 years ago, before the beginning of the full-scale war, about a half of Polish population, 45%, I think, said they had positive feelings towards the Ukrainians. So Ukrainians looked much more like Czech people or Americans to Polish population. Okay, so that's a huge change. We have also another instrument. It's called the Bogardus scale. And here people are asked not how do you feel about Ukrainians, Americans, but they are asked, would you accept a Ukrainian or a Pole as your neighbor, as your son-in-law, as your boss at work, and so on? And once again, if 20 years ago, majority of Ukrainians, majority of Poles didn't want a Pole or a Ukrainian to be their neighbor or their boss, this has changed. Okay, so Poles basically, for majority of them, a clear majority, don't have a problem, any problem with having a Ukrainian as a neighbor, as a colleague, a job, as a member of their family. This is very important. And all these contacts which I am mentioning, played a major role in 2022, because when the full-scale war started, Poles knew instinctively they should help the Ukrainians. Okay, and this was possible in particular because of different contacts, because of different networks of cooperation established during last 10, 20 years. I mean, everybody, almost everybody in Ukraine had some contacts in Poland, and several people, several institutions in Poland had some contacts in Ukraine. Okay, so this made possible this very quick response. Okay, and this wide response in receiving several million of refugees who came to Poland since 24th February 2022. Poland received the largest number of the Ukrainian refugees in the world. Polish-Ukrainian border has been crossed since the beginning of the war some 15 million times. I'm not saying 15 million Ukrainians are living in Poland currently, because some of them crossed the border several times, okay? Going to Poland, coming back to Ukraine, going again to Poland. But at the beginning of the war, we have received, once again, several million Ukrainian refugees. 1 million of them is currently staying in Poland. So that's a huge number. Next point, which I have already mentioned a little bit. This is Russia. Russia and the Russian threat. Well, basically Poland since early 90s was quite skeptical, quite fearful about Russia. That's why we wanted to get to NATO. That's why we wanted to have as close as possible relations with the United States. We had been, especially in the 90s, we had been a little bit like Cassandra from Greek mythology, because we were kind of warning everybody about a potential Russian threat. And for a long time, basically, this idea didn't seem very reliable, okay? under Yeltsin, under early Putin, especially Ukrainians, didn't share our fear about Russia. For a long time, Ukraine had very close relations with Russia. It wanted to be independent from Russia, but at the same time, it wanted to, for example, to receive cheap Russian gas, okay? This started to change. Since the Orange Revolution, since Russian intervention in Georgia in 2008, however, especially since 2014, it became clear for both Poland and Ukraine that Russia is indeed a threat. And once again, another reason explaining Polish involvement in helping the Ukrainians was the fact they were victims of Russian aggression. Okay, we could say that Poles and Ukrainians look at each other a little bit like through a mirror. When Ukrainians look at Poland, they see a country they would like Ukraine to be. When Poles look through that mirror, they see their tragic history, especially the history of Second World War, the Katyn massacre, the destruction of Warsaw by the Germans, and so on. But they also see a future they would like to avoid. So this creates quite a strong bond between the two countries, right? Because once again, we don't directly share a common destiny, but there is a feeling of a community in sense of desired or undesired destinies of the two countries. And finally, there is economy, okay? There is economy. This is a little bit our weak point, I would say. Partially, that's understandable. When you look at the numbers, especially on the Polish side, Ukraine accounts only for few percent, very few percent of Polish foreign trade. So it's not a major economic part, okay? There are some Polish investors present in Ukraine. However, basically, for many years, economy has been rather, once again, a weak point of our relations. We wanted to develop energy cooperation to become independent from Russia. Here, the symbol was the project of an oil pipeline going from Odessa in Ukraine to Płock in Poland. Well, the Ukrainian part of the pipeline was constructed, but the Polish part was never built. Okay, so this project of Odessa-Płock pipeline was a failure. We've sold, some years ago, we've sold famous Gdańsk shipyard. This is the place where Lech Wałęsa, the leader of Solidarity Trade Union, worked. So we've sold this Gdańsk shipyard to Ukrainian investors, to Industrial Union of Donbas, an oligarchy group from Ukraine. And when they bought it, the European Commission said that Gdańsk shipyard was receiving illegal financement from the Polish state. So basically, it had to pay back this money or just close the business. And once again, we see also economic problems. Because when the full-scale war started, the EU decided to open its market to Ukrainian agricultural products and also to the Ukrainian transport services to help Ukraine. The idea was good on, let's say, moral level, on geopolitical level. However, nobody probably in the Polish government studied the possible negative effects of such a decision. And in consequence, Ukrainian grain flooded the Polish market. Once again, Polish government didn't know what to do with that. Later, Ukrainian transport providers also flooded the Polish market, and this led to the blockade on the Polish-Ukrainian border, which we witnessed for last month. So this economy, once again, remains a kind of challenge, right? So to conclude about the past and the present, I would say that Poland, for a long time, Poland, already many years ago, let's put it like that, understood that it needs an independent Ukraine to protect the region against Russian Empire. This idea was already developed by some Polish experts in the interwar period. It was also promoted during the Cold War by the Polish monthly Kultura, which was published by Polish émigré intellectuals in Paris. And this idea was later adopted by the independent Poland governments since 90s, okay? We need independent European Ukraine as a sort of protection against Russia. For a long time, for 20 years, this idea was received with a limited interest in Ukraine. But this changed with the Russian aggression in 2014 and in 2022. And at that moment, Poland's plan became feasible. Please keep in mind that until 2022, Ukraine didn't have the membership perspective in Ukraine. So Ukraine was not perceived by EU as a potential candidate. Only after the full-scale aggression of Russia, EU recognized the membership perspective of Ukraine, and later this year, it recognized Ukraine as a candidate to the EU. So in this very tragic context, Polish kind of long-time plan for Ukraine finally became feasible. So what about the future, especially in the context of recent elections in Poland? We have a new government in Poland, a new government which will try to fix the mistakes of the Law and Justice team. This concerns especially the disrespect for the rule of law. This concerns the frequent clashes with the EU. And this also concerns the politicization of relations with Ukraine. On all these three issues, this is a positive information for Ukraine and for Polish-Ukrainian relations. We will have some problems, especially in the economic area. This is obvious. When Spain was to integrate European communities, there were also French farmers who were protesting against such a scenario because they were fearing the competition of Spanish farmers. So once again, this is something unavoidable, okay? But we want Ukraine to be part of EU. It's in our geopolitical interest. So we have to manage that. We have to manage that in accordance with EU law and in cooperation with our European and with our Ukrainian partners. And this new government will do all this much better than the previous one, which didn't care about the rule of law, which was anti-European, and which once again, especially before the elections, politicized the relations with Ukraine. So what is the future for our bilateral relations? Well, I would say the best scenario in the long term is the accession of Ukraine to the European Union. Our foreign minister, the one who is coming back, by the way, to his office now, Radosław Sikorski, said several years ago that the membership in the European Union defines more and more who is our friend and who is our ally. And basically, he was right. When you are a part of the European Union with another country, this makes your cooperation, this makes your relations much easier, because EU creates a framework for your relations. Without such a framework, you have to work continuously to maintain your bilateral relations. Of course, the accession of Ukraine to EU will not be an easy process, probably not a very fast process. But this seems, once again, feasible, okay? This seems feasible. Of course, Ukrainian membership will be probably of a very different character than what we had 20 years ago. I call it a little bit membership minus, okay? So Ukraine will be member of EU, but there will be long transition periods. And in some areas, well, like Schengen, for example, Probably this will be impossible because of the war in eastern part of Ukraine. However, once again, we have Cyprus, which is divided, and even despite that division, it joined the EU. During the Cold War, Germany was one of the co-founders of the European communities, despite the existence of the DDR, so the Eastern Germany. So, speaking about scenarios, first point, EU membership for Ukraine. Second point, a bilateral treaty. In 1992, Poland signed a treaty on friendship and cooperation with Ukraine. And during that time, basically almost everybody here in the region signed similar treaties with its neighbors, okay? So from 1991 to 1994, we as Poland, we signed such treaties with everybody, with Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and in 1994, Lithuania. And these documents were kind of quite similar one to each other, okay? Now, it would be reasonable to sign a new treaty which would correspond to the position of both countries in Europe and also to their bilateral cooperation. Some people compare it to the Franco-German Élysée Treaty from 1963. Once again, we have two biggest countries in Western Europe, which are the Franco-German, as they say, engine, le couple franco-allemand, so we could have another couple in Central Europe. Negotiations on this treaty seem to have started in 2022. However, basically for the moment, it seems nothing concrete came out of it. I mean, I've been asking a few months ago, is there any kind of project, even an unofficial one, which I could have a look at, but basically no. So basically the only reference I can give you on that topic, last year there was an article of Jan Krzysztof Bielecki and Paweł Kowal on Onet website on how this new treaty should look like. Both these authors said that two areas are of particular importance. First, security, military security, but also alimentary security and so on. And second, people-to-people contacts. So this is second point, okay, speaking about scenarios. Third point, after the beginning of the full-scale war in Ukraine, some authors, especially those affiliated with different right-wing websites or think tanks, proposed to establish a sort of Polish-Ukrainian confederation. That's a very dangerous idea and not very realist. We as Poland, we are members of EU. So we cannot enter in a kind of confederation, whatever it means, with a country out of EU, because basically this would be probably against EU law. Besides, also Ukraine wants to join EU and NATO, by the way, okay? So this is one of our main assets from the point of view of Kyiv. We are a valuable partner for Ukraine because we are members of EU, we are members of NATO. And finally, please keep in mind that Ukrainians are currently fighting for their freedom. So it would be quite politically incorrect to tell the Ukrainians, well, of course, we will help you, but in exchange, you have to join a kind of confederation with us. It doesn't make sense. Well, I can understand these authors I've mentioned. Okay? Law and Justice government had major clashes, as I've said, with the EU. So it was seeking a kind of alternative to EU. And Polish-Ukrainian cooperation, Polish-Ukrainian confederation seemed, well, an interesting scenario here. Once again, this is, especially after recent elections in Poland, first, dangerous, second, not feasible. And well, of course, there is the last, fourth scenario, which is called victory or victories of Russia. I'm not saying that Russia will take control of Ukraine because, well, this is basically not possible, rather, okay? But what we are seeing, especially now, the problems with the American aid, now recent small advancements of Russia in the east of Ukraine, all this means that this conflict will not end soon. And in that context, Ukraine's accession to EU will be more difficult. Ukraine's accession to NATO will be probably impossible because NATO clearly said that Ukraine may be a member when the conditions are met. By conditions, they mean victory or peace. And if the war continues for next months and years, also the Ukrainian fatigue will increase in Poland. Ukraine will stop to be so interesting. So in that context, once again, our bilateral relations will not progress so much. I think I'm done, and well, I'm open for for a quarter of hour for some questions and answers.
Professor, sorry, I joined a bit late due to technical issues. I just want to inform you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Andrzej, for this very, very good, interesting presentation. I suppose that many people have questions. Some people wrote their questions on the chat. Some other can raise their hand physically or use the Zoom hand. Let's have a look at the chat, waiting for the raised hand. Katarzyna Skórniewska. Miss Katarzyna Skórniewska, would you like to ask directly Professor Szeptycki your question?
Well, I can read the question on the chat, no problem. I would like to ask about the impact of media on all what was said. From Polish media, we are continually kept on high hope for Ukrainian victory. Emotions are very difficult, and Polish society is getting tired. How should the politics in Poland be designed to keep society on board with the full support? Well, first, of course, the media did play an important role in Polish-Ukrainian relations during last 15 years, 20 years even. Especially because they've covered always in a very positive way the Orange Revolution, the Revolution of Dignity, and finally the Ukrainian defense war against Russia. The problem with the medias is that they get tired probably even faster than people. Okay, so they are looking continuously looking for new topics. And of course, this has an influence on this has an influence on the population, on the voters, on the political leadership of the country. Also, Ukrainian media do play a role because, especially since 2014, they are more and more interested in understanding what's going on in Poland. So they are presenting Polish transformation, Polish experience. They are looking for some similarities. I'm a regular commentator on some Ukrainian TVs. But at the same time, Ukrainian medias these last years have been more and more conscious of internal problems in Poland. I've been asked a month or 2 months ago, I mean, before the elections in October, for example, is there a risk of urbanization of Poland? Okay. Now, what can we do? Well, basically, we have to ask our deputies. We have to continuously, if this is important for you, Mrs. Skórniewska, well, you have to ask your deputies continuously about the support for Ukraine. You can also get involved in different NGOs, which are either helping Ukrainians or which may be lobbying for helping Ukraine. Especially after 15th October election, we see very clearly that basically civic society in Poland plays a huge role in making of Polish politics. So just you have to be involved. Shall I continue with chat?
Yeah, we can continue with chat. Maybe Mr. Jan Boroń want to ask by himself the question or not?
Well, Mr. Boroń has written, you mentioned Volhynia. What other events from 20th century shape the most mutual relations between Ukraine and Poland? I would say certainly 3rd December 1991, when Poland was the first country in the world to recognize the independence of Ukraine. This is something very symbolic. I mean, both symbolic, but very symbolic, okay? And this is something which will never be undone. I mean, even if we have some problems, we will. Even if we had some serious problems, we can always say, we can always come back to this date, reminding everybody that this was Poland, which was the first country in the world to recognize Ukraine. So I think this is one of major events from 20th century, which plays a major role. Now there is a question of Nell Bauer. Do you think that a federation like Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth has any probabilities of happening in contemporary times? Well, I think I have already answered this question. I think rather not, okay? This is a dangerous and not really feasible scenario. We are members of EU and NATO. They are, in both cases, a major asset, something we have worked on, I mean, Poland, to get in. So we have to consider Polish-Ukrainian cooperation within the framework of EU and hopefully NATO, and not as a sort of federation. Of course, there are also examples of close relations between countries which are in EU and which are out of EU. Scandinavian countries are a good example here, okay? 3 Nordic countries are in EU, but Norway and Iceland are out of EU. They are only members of the EEA, European Economic Area, and despite this fact that some are in, some are out, they maintain close relations. So it's feasible. It's difficult, but it's feasible, but not within a framework of a confederation. Maria Judasz asked, is the Confederation proposal a part of intermarum idea, or are they somehow connected? Well, I would say partially yes. I mean, people who speak about Polish-Ukrainian Confederation would very often speak about intermarum or about Three Seas initiative or something similar, yes. There is also a question from Annelisa Sophie Ochrenmacher. Sorry if I mispronounce. Were there any new efforts regarding economic cooperation shortly before the Russian invasion? Yes, in October 2020, so after he was re-elected, I mean, after the election of Zelensky and after the re-election of Duda, during COVID, Duda went to Kyiv, he met Zelensky, and this was kind of beginning of new chapter in bilateral relations. And an important aspect of this visit was economy, especially cooperation in the energy field, the Polish PGNiG, so Polskie Górnictwo Naftowe I Gazownictwo, so Polish oil extraction and gas company, was interested in buying some regional centers of distribution of energy in Ukraine, and so on. So the answer is yes. No more questions on the Zoom. I mean on the chat.
Yes. So I would have maybe, do I have time for a very short question from my side?
Yes, of course, always.
So, because now we are, as you know, in a difficult military situation, we don't know how it will finish. We don't know when it will finish. And so it's very difficult to think about what will be in the future. Nevertheless, I will ask you to do so. Please tell me, we can expect that a country with a quiet, how to say, a suffering country like Ukraine can have many very nationalistic parties that will win some elections. It's quite natural when you are you have a war that you have a moment of national movement. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You know better Ukrainian politics than me. In such a situation, don't you think that there is a danger that very quickly it could become a problem with other neighbors and Russia as well, like Poland?
Well, you know, on the first topic, please keep in mind that currently fighting Russia, Ukrainians have a Jew as president. So I would say that worries about Ukrainian nationalism are rather unfounded. Okay, this is largely a narration of the Russian propaganda. Ukrainians became largely, also thanks to this war, a political nation, not an ethnic nation. Okay, I mean, you can speak Russian, but if you are a Ukrainian patriot from Kharkiv, from Odessa, nobody really cares. This is also a heritage, by the way, of the Soviet and Russian Empire. This is something we, in fact, we in Poland, but also in France, I think, we don't really grab, okay, that you can have a multi-ethnic society where everybody feels equal to another. Of course, this situation differs from one region to another because in Western Ukraine, especially in Lviv, Ternopil, and so on. So in Galicia, some nationalistic sentiments may be stronger, but far more to the east or more to the south, this is really not the case. Okay, they had a nationalist party in the parliament, Svoboda, but it was kind of affiliated or unofficially sponsored by Yanukovych, and after Yanukovych fled to Russia, Svoboda basically disappeared from the political life. You can have some nationalistic elements. Quite visible, not very numerous, but quite visible groups, political or military. Yes, this is the case, but on a broader. In a broader sense, I don't think this is a threat. Problems with other neighbors? Well, yes, there is one other neighbor, whose relations with Ukraine are very problematic. This is Hungary. Hungary basically has never accepted fully its post-Trianon borders. There are important minorities of Hungarians all around Hungary. Besides, Orban is playing, is using good relations with Russia for his internal political reasons and for his foreign policy as a kind of instrument of pressure on the EU. So Orban may easily block. He's trying to do that. May easily block any attempts for further aid or whatever, new sanctions against Russia. And also Ukrainians did fear already before 24th February that the Zakarpattia region, so this one region which is on the border with Slovakia and with Hungary, there is a strong Hungarian minority there. They don't speak basically Ukrainian. They don't feel fully a part of Ukraine because Zakarpattia means Transcarpathia. So that's a part of Ukraine which is on the other side of the Carpathian Mountains, okay? It was a part of Hungary before First World War. It was a part of Czechoslovakia before Second World War. So there is a potential risk there, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't know, I know that you have to escape, so I don't want to steal your time, Andrzej, but as you see, there are two hands raised and another comment on the chat. Maybe we have a time for the question of Elżbieta Dybcio-Wojciechowska?
Yeah, please, because for Mrs. Kurniewska, I'm sorry, but I've already answered one question, so it will be difficult to answer another one. Yeah, please, Mrs. Dybcio-Wojciechowska, please go on.
Okay. Hello, I'm...
Hello.
I deal with exchange programs with Ukrainians. I work in the office which deals with, we have a lot of programs and also bilateral program with Ukrainian students and researchers. And we all know that we support them, of course, and we continue to support the bilateral exchange. And I would like to ask about the economic problems you mentioned. I mean, this on-Bahadi richesse, I mean, the fertility, because we all know that the problem with grains, yes, it was also the problem, the economic problem of Poland, and the government didn't foresee the problem, this economic, as I said, fertility and on-Bahadi richesse. I mean, the embarrass, yes. And I would like to ask whether we are able to be more economically, to foresee more economic engagement. I mean, not only the political issues should be take into consideration, but also this, as we know, as you mentioned, that we see Ukrainians like our not only neighbors, good neighbors sometimes, but our bosses, our really good friends, and why don't use it to the economic prosperity of our two countries? I mean, we know that Germans are there, and they prepare we can say economic development also in accordance to the investments there. Yes, and what do you think?
Polish investors have been present in Ukraine for many years. PZU, PKO, Barlinek, I could continue like that. Also, currently, there are, basically more than 2,000 enterprises which registered, if I'm not mistaken, at the Polish government that they are interested in the reconstruction of Ukraine. We have several programs, governmental and non-governmental, to support that. Well, the question is just how much Polish enterprises will be competitive on this reconstruction market, if I can say so.
Yes, I would like to say in Polish, I don't know if I use the good word, but we have klęskę urodzaju po prostu z tym zbożem i mało osób wie, że jednak to było trudne do przewidzenia. It was difficult to foresee.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay,
thank you.
I know that there are two more questions that are waiting, but time is finishing. I'm afraid that we will have to let Professor Szeptycki go to a very, very important meeting just now. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for all the interesting questions, and have a good meeting now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Goodbye.